Should be pushing to it now. And we are live, folks. Close this up. All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Howard County Board of Education candidate debate for the candidates in District 2. I'm your host and moderator, Scott Ewart of Scotty's blog. Joining us for the debate today are the following candidates running in District 2. Antonia Barkley Watts, Larry Pretlow, and James Cecil. A few quick notes on the debate rules. I will ask a question, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. I'll hold up my phone and indicate when you have 30 seconds remaining, and I will notify the candidates to complete their sentence when their time is up. I ask each candidate to be respectful of the time they're given to answer each question. After each candidate has had an opportunity to answer the question, each candidate will have an opportunity to provide a rebuttal for 1 minute in the order they were asked the original question. This rebuttal will give the candidates an opportunity to answer any items mentioned by other candidates or to further clarify their position. As each candidate has joined the podcast for Scotty's blog in the past and had an opportunity to provide an introduction, we will move directly into the question section of this debate to optimize the time that we have today. I conducted a random ordering before the start of this event with the candidates. And the first question will go to James, followed by Larry, and then Antonia. And then we will rotate that for each subsequent question. All right, let's get into it, y'all. My first question this morning is on the topic of school start times. I know this seems like an odd thing to talk about in the world we're in today, but kids will return to school at some point, and this will remain a hot topic in our community when that happens. There have been studies shared that tell us starting school later for children helps in many ways. We have bus schedules that show our kids in our school system picked up as early as 6:03 a.m. in the morning. Meaning those children are forced to get up very early in the morning to catch that bus. What do you feel about starting school later? And how do you think we can achieve that with the budget difficulties we have today? And again, James, first question, you get to start this one off.
Sure. Thank you, Scott, and thanks for the opportunity to discuss these topics. And for school start times, I wish this was the discussion that started 25 years ago when I was in high school in particular. I grew up on the Eastern Shore on Kent Island, and at the time my high school was all the way in Centerville. So I had a 45 to 50-minute bus ride just from when I got on the bus. I was at the bus stop 4:45. In the winter, my hair would freeze if I was just running out of the shower. And it's not a way to set somebody up for success. It's a time in every child's life where they need their sleep to be prepared for the day. And studies are showing that it's not as simple as going to bed earlier so they can wake up earlier. Not just because they have structured activities in the afternoons and evenings, but where their brains are functioning and what their brains are doing, they function later and need more recovery time to be successful in the morning. Not only that, looking at other barriers to attendance that children and families face. Later school start times allow for more time for families to work together to collaborate on getting children to school, getting children to school in time for school meals, especially those on free and reduced meals, and giving them opportunities to start the day nourished, not only well rested, but also well nourished. And so there's a lot of factors that go into it. And there's opportunities to explore it as we get into potential changes in school transportation and kind of how we phase into this recovery process. Our school bus schedule is going to change at some point, and there might be opportunities to explore and pilot programs in the fall.
All right, thank you. Larry.
Yes, I agree with late start times, but also making sure that we get community input in doing that. As an Oakland Mills Village board member and community advocate, I've had the opportunity to hear from residents of my community on their strong support for healthy school hours. But unfortunately, the BOE decided to redistrict walkers and turn them into bus riders for the residents of the Verona, where I live, which decrease their sleep as they now have to wake up earlier to catch the bus. I've helped engage the community and some BO members to explain some of these implications from how our school hours are would be structured with this change in school attendance areas. But I certainly would support later start times, and in a structured way that make sure each child is getting the nourishment, make sure it's convenient for moms and dads, and we do that certainly with community input.
All right, thank you. Antonia.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having us here. And so I just wanted to talk about school start times, right? Everybody agrees that it's a great idea, right? I think that we can all say that the data supports it, the research is behind it. High schoolers would love it, right? So I think everybody can appreciate that it's a great idea. And as a teacher, I have taught classes that start at 7:30 a.m. I've taught, seventh graders at 8 a.m. And I can tell you that my students at first period, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, look completely different later in the day, right? The energy level, the output that I get from them, it completely shifts. And I can tell that is because they are not getting adequate amount of sleep. So I would say that as we're kind of moving forward, we can actually maybe start to explore some of these ideas of later start times by even having our check-ins for our middle school, high school, elementary school students start later. So maybe they can start all the check-ins after 9 o'clock, 9:30 and see what that looks like. So we're kind of just building that into the system that we're in right now so that we could move forward with a little bit of feedback on how that might look starting in the fall if we're able to start in the fall. So I think that's one of the things that we can explore. So it gives everybody kind of a community buy-in because they've seen it. Parents have seen it work a little bit. Kids have had a little bit of experience with it. And it's kind of in a safe, if you will, environment and budget-friendly environment. So we can get that buy-in there.
Excellent. James, any follow-up?
Yeah, I was going to say in terms of other ways piloting might look as we come back to school in the fall, looking at what California and some other districts are doing that are closer to getting back to a classroom, at least in planning, looking at how they're structuring attendance for some of the class periods when they're getting kids to school to support social distancing. So as we're looking at piloting later start times, you can also look at optional first periods or study hall and first period options. There's a lot of different options that can be embedded within a traditional start time that could still support the science of starting school later. And so there's a lot of opportunity there to see what that looks like.
Okay. Larry, any follow-up?
I would want to and what it would take to ensure healthy and safe school hours. I would want the BOE to start a task force that will consist of school and community administration officials, as well as teachers, students, parents, and BOE members that will be responsible for looking over the budget and conducting research with parents on how to achieve, the best effective approach to starting school later.
All right, Antonia, you get the last word on this.
Two things that I'll add to each one of the previous comments is I have actually taught when I taught in Mississippi, we went from a standard schedule to introduce what was called a zero block. And it gave our students the opportunity to get before school tutoring, which was a novel idea. And it allowed others to get a little bit later sleep. So the idea of shifting the current day to allow students to get more sleep, but also allow some to get more help is great. And also, I think that we have studied later school start times a lot in this school district. This is not something new. The research has been done. The most budget friendly option is switching the elementary school kids and the high school kids. And obviously there are some big concerns there with putting elementary school kids out in a bus stop in the dark. And so we can kind of continue to have these same conversations about this, but we know, we already have all the data there to make the decision. It's about if we want to go forward and maybe look at some innovative solutions, things that are happening around the nation, like in Denver, they kind of do like an Uber style model to get students to school. So I think at this stage, we're going to have to start thinking outside of the box.
Okay. I thank you all for that. We're going to move on to question 2. And Larry, you're going to start us off with this, but let me ask the question. And I asked this in the debate yesterday afternoon, and I like this question well enough that I was interested in the answers from the candidates in this district. The 5 members elected to the board this election cycle will very possibly be dealing with redistricting when High School 13 comes online. The school will need to be filled, and that will generate the need for the redistricting process. My question is this: as a school system will continue to have schools that will be overcrowded when High School 13 comes online, would you support a redistricting process that solely focuses on the needs of filling High School 13? Or would you prefer that the board also address the continued overcrowding issues and needs at the other schools across all school levels across the entire county during that upcoming redistricting process? Larry, it's on you.
I would want the school system or the Board of Education to focus on overcrowding where it's happening at every school. Because when we redistrict, we have to focus on prioritizing distance, capacity, and feed size countywide, so that we fill the school. This time around, we are letting students be swapped from under capacity schools. And so, we have Howard High School. Howard High School is largely overcrowded. There's no high school in Elkridge. And we had a Board of Education member, Jen Mallow. She played a political game where she moved Waterloo, Phelps Luck, Elchester, Thunder Hill, Talbot Springs, the list goes on. And we have to focus, I'll just say it one more time, we have to focus on distance, capacity, feed size, countywide. And I believe I'm one of the best prepared candidates to be elected and serve on the board and make sure that that's something that we do. My opponents went to Mallow's fundraiser. How can we trust them with handling redistricting when this one was a disaster?
Okay. Antonia.
So I think that we are an entire school system, right? So I don't think that we can kind of piecemeal this solution together. If we are going to start the redistricting process for High School 13, it is inevitably going to impact every other school, right? So I think we need to be thinking big picture. And if High School 13 is coming online, that is an opportunity to redistrict countywide.
Okay. James.
Sure. So I think, we have to look at the whole system when we redistrict. There's a lot that could have been done better this last round. I think everybody agrees the finished product was not the best product. It was, the best of what could be done, especially when we look at influence on the board. We can look at that. It wasn't just to any one particular board member. There were moves that could have alleviated capacity that were blocked, especially capacity in the East. Those moves were blocked. They could have brought relief to District 2 students. And so looking at High School 13 reopening, we do need to start that process much sooner than we did the last time, learn from the mistakes that were made last time, allow for proper community involvement to make sure families have a better understanding of what the process is, what the impacts could be, and that they can better advocate for themselves and have an opportunity that is not the last minute as decisions are scrambling to be made. We do need to learn from what happened last time, but we do need to look at the system as a whole.
Okay. Larry, 1 minute for follow-up rebuttal.
Yeah, I would just like to say we ignored our most vulnerable communities. The Hispanic and Asian community were completely ignored. And I've been involved in letting my community know the proposed changes, which the board failed to do. So when we do redistricting, when we consider, prioritizing the distance, the capacity, and the feed size county-wise, we want to make sure that we get the communication part right. But behind me, I have a map. And if you look at this map, I noted down every polygon in District 2, which was proposed to be moved in either the final plan or the superintendent's plan. And if you see this is too many moves. Hopefully that becomes a thing. Too many moves. But yeah.
Okay. Antonia, follow up.
So just to kind of echo what James said, that District 2 needed relief during the redistricting process, right? And I don't think that there wasn't, our district was marginalized. We were set aside while other districts kind of got the lion's share of the attention and the conversation. And so as we're looking forward to redistricting, I want to really make sure that our community has a voice and that we are not set aside. We're not the back burner, that when things come down to the wire, we're not, just shuffling around in Oakland Mills really quick. So I just want to make sure that in the future, when we go forward in this process, that each community that's impacted does get an equal amount of time to express their concerns about the process.
Okay. James, you get the final word.
Actually, I think I'm good.
Okay. Well, that makes that easy then. Then we will move on to question 3. And so question 3, we can't have a discussion about the school system, not talk about distance learning. We've been in this mode for a little while now, and it continues to evolve. And we will remain in this mode for the remainder of the school year. And very well could continue in this mode or some hybrid mode of distance learning into the beginning of next school year. I'm guessing many of you have talked with members of the community about the rollout and implementation of distance learning during your campaign for office. I'm curious how you think our jurisdiction is doing in regards to distance learning so far, and what should the school system be looking to do to enhance our current program in case we are in some mode of continuing distance learning into next year. Antonia, you get to start us off with this one.
Okay. So first I want to say the teachers have done an excellent job. This is not something that was on their radar. This is not something we go to, I'm an educator, so it's not something that we did as in pre-service program. It's not something you do as student teaching. This is something completely new, and they took the ball and they ran with it. And I'll say this really quick because I've done the flipped classroom model, which takes this distance learning idea and combines it with the traditional means of teaching. And I will say it was very hard. It's hard because you have to get the parent buy-in. You have to teach your students how to use it. So, I mean, our teachers just did a great job with this. One of the things I have heard from community members is, and even my own students when I did this, is that they would like to have more live teaching. So they do want to see their teacher, students want to see their teacher, parents want to see their teacher, and they want to actually have a live interaction, something that you're learning new material as opposed to keeping up. And especially I'd love to see that with our students with disabilities and our English language learners to really kind of get the outreach and the extra support in this environment, because it's tough. It's tough to learn online. I've done it. I'm sure that everybody's taken a class or two online, and it's just completely different. It's a foreign idea. But as we're kind of getting our feet underneath of us, I'd love to see a little bit more live learning. And then I'll throw this in here really quick. I think this is actually an exciting opportunity, right? We have the ability to kind of rethink how we're delivering education to students, and this is a great opportunity for us to kind of try some new things out and see if we can really work to increase learning.
Okay, James.
Sure. So, both a minor and elementary school, and looking at the impact on, I have a third grader and a kindergartner. For my third grader, it's, in talking to students with disabilities, losing the many supports that were helping him be successful when he was in the classroom, in the school. A lot of those are challenging to recreate in a distance format. And so looking at the regression that he's experiencing, especially in social behaviors, those are gaps that we're seeing within the system right now. It's hard to recreate that. All those intensive services that a lot of students needed for their success, that the services are slated to be delayed in the current format, but that doesn't do much in terms of the short term and what families are experiencing now. And again, what they're going to experience in the classrooms when we do get back to class. And my kindergartner, she misses her classmates, she misses her teacher. Anytime she can see somebody on the screen that she knows, her anxiety comes down, stress level comes down. And that is something that, is definitely missed in a distance format. I know there's a lot of re-education for teachers right now and getting used to the technology. And as we get out of that re-education mode and look to more ways to explore that in-person component as we plan for the fall, there is a lot of opportunity to do that. And, again, exploring how this ties into hybrid classroom opportunities, especially in the upper grade levels. But it's a challenge for families right now, for sure.
All right. Larry.
In terms of distance, of the distance learning rollout, the school system showed a failure of leadership. And I've said this before in the podcast. The school system did a good job with food distribution centers, but many families don't have transportation to get there. And if we still are paying for these bus contracts, we could send food to these homes on the bus at no extra cost, like Ohio is doing. In my perspective, we're failing our most vulnerable students. We're spending $400 plus for laptops, which is way too expensive, even for touchscreen Chromebooks. Extra money spent carefree means less money for programs to close the achievement gap, such as money that we could be spending on reading specialists in an already tight budget when we're spending $400 per laptop. Our most vulnerable students who did not have computing devices, did not have access to learning curriculums, and this increases the inequities. And so the achievement gap is going to grow wider. I commend my opponents for speaking to how well such a bad experience has gone. But if they know anything about the families in District 2, especially where I live, it's been a struggle. And yes, it is nice when our children can see their classmates and teachers, through the screen. But we want to make sure every child has that opportunity. So we definitely have to get this thing done the right way.
Okay, thanks. Antonia, follow up.
Sure, yeah. So I think the feedback from the family has been that we need to increase the time and access that they have with their teachers. And so we can talk about that, but also so Larry brought up a good point about food service and food delivery. And I know that James and I both are with Columbia Community Care. So we're doing a lot of outreach there to make sure that students have access to food and to the things that they need. So I think that to improve distance learning, we have to we have to combine all of the resources, right? We have to look at what we can do digitally, how we can use this new model really to help give more students opportunities to access the education that they really need and they desire. And so I do think there are, and maybe a bit optimistic here, but I do think there are really good opportunities for us to utilize technology in a way that it hasn't been utilized before. And we could actually reach more students this way.
James, follow up.
Sure. And so, looking at the rollout from the county in terms of, how we rolled it out, I talked about preparing teachers for how to deliver this material and deliver this content. Starting it sooner would have been much more reckless in terms of we had thousands of students without devices. To start sooner without preparation, we needed the time to get devices. And we talk about, the spending. Technology funding has been underfunded for a long time, underfunded before this current board even sat down, but also underfunded by the current board. I think, there's a deficit of technology within the system that we're experiencing now. And we're seeing overall just how vulnerable our most vulnerable students are. And this does make it worse for them. But there is step towards solutions that are going to come from this. And I choose to look at the optimistic side of what can we take from this to go forward.
All right, Larry, you get the last word on this one.
Yeah, we want to be optimistic, but we also want to be smart. And we don't want to trial and error for too long because students' educations are at risk. The state superintendent has encouraged looping, right? Where students retain the same teacher to encourage stability. I think this is something that's most important for us here in District 2 because that's a sense of community for our students. And that's something that I hope we do, an approach that we take going into the fall. And we need to listen to our experts right now, and they are saying that mental health is important. So with the later start times and with looping, these are things that we can look at wherever we are in the fall, whether it's still dealing with the coronavirus pandemic or back in classrooms. These are things that we need to consider.
All right, thank you. All right, folks, we're going to move on to my next question. Back in December, the Baltimore Sun ran an article titled "Howard County Special Education Teachers Warn They and the System are reaching a breaking point," detailing issues about budgeting, staffing, and training. And after that, we found out Howard County's teachers union filed a class action grievance about staff crisis that was mostly signed by teachers who were special educators. With competing budget priorities over class size, technology, music, health fund deficit, and many other issues, how do you think the school system should be looking to address the issues with special education today? James, you get the first word on this.
Sure. This is something I just spoke to the county council about on Wednesday night, of the importance of continuing to fund and finding a way to maintain the funding request put forward by the board to help offset, again, multiple years of underfunding special education in our county. We're seeing the repercussions of delaying service for so many of our students. We've added over 1,000 students and 2.5 educators at this point. We're going to add hundreds more, and with the current budget as it sits before the council now, there's not enough relief in that budget for them. We have to find a way to fund special education. We are losing our special educators. Listening to them testify even again on Wednesday of the impacts personally for our educators, the stress level involved of what they see our students go through and, what they know our students need. We have a big achievement gap with special education. Every metric you want to look at, we are underserving our special education children and students with disabilities. Looking at graduation rates, graduation rate for special education is 67% to the county average of 92. And again, we're failing them. We know we are failing them. Our teachers know we are failing them. Our parents know we are failing them. We have to start making improvements other than saying we'll try to do better. We have to put our money where our priorities are, and this needs to be a priority for us.
Okay, thank you. Larry.
Special education is a equity issue, since special education students need an advocate to fight for them. Parents need advocates to fight for them. And this proportionately impacts lower income families, as they may not have the money to fight for an IEP. We need to work to increase special education funding as much as possible, instead of increasing mid-level administration like being proposed this time around. We could be investing more in special education. It's essential that we identify our students with undiagnosed disabilities, be it dyslexia or whatever it may be. Because if caught early, there may only be 1 to 2 IEP meetings a week. IEP, there might be 3 to 4 IEP meetings a week if caught too late. That costs money, and that takes time away from other areas of interest for a student or for their household. So we definitely have to support special education parents, students, or the achievement gap will continue to grow. A lot of folks don't really draw the correlation between the achievement gap and special education, but there certainly is one. And I'll just say it one more time. We need to increase special education funding as much as possible. It's something that we could have already done by now.
Okay, thank you. Antonia.
So special education is actually near and dear to my heart. I started, I've told the story before, but in fact, I testified to this extent. My youngest, actually, when he was 6 months old, wasn't moving the way that he should. And, as a new mom, I didn't really know how or what, but I just knew something wasn't right. And so I was actually able to get him into infants and toddlers, which is the younger version of, if you will, of kind of the special education process. And so he was able to get all these services. He got speech and PT, and it really kind of caught him up. So he did not need special education services once he got into school. So I'm a big advocate, big fan of getting children what they need very early on in the process, and it definitely has an impact for them later on in life. And then I say this as well, that my children, my kindergartner went through the REC program, which is a program that pairs, for those who don't know, it pairs typical performing peers with students with disabilities all in one setting. So it's an inclusive model, and it's great for the student with disability, but it's also great for the student, that the typical performing peer, because this peer is actually able to gain empathy and all these different kinds of social skills to realize that everybody is the same, right? Like, and we need to recognize disabilities or abilities and kind of promote this inclusive environment. And so I think when we're talking about funding special education, we need to think about funding it for students with disabilities, but also what that means for their typical performing peers to interact with these students as well. So I think special education is kind of sometimes seen in the vacuum, but really we need to see it as if we're serving this population of kids, we're serving all of our kids as well.
Okay. James, any follow-up?
Sure. Looking at the inclusive classroom model, there's reports that just came out in terms of student conduct, student behavior, student discipline, and the impact of disruption in the classroom, sometimes associated with an inclusive classroom. Looking at supporting special education, supporting the general education students as well, students that are having their needs met within the classrooms is a benefit to everybody in the classroom. More special educators in the classroom. They're there primarily to work with special education students, but also general education students. They're a resource for everybody in that classroom. When they're in that classroom, they're supporting the primary teacher of a classroom as well. And so supporting special education is supporting every student as well.
All right, excellent. Larry, 1 minute.
If we cut wasteful spending, we will be able to better fund special education. If we cut waste and administration.
Oh, we may have lost Larry. All right, you know what?
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Okay.
Yay.
I'll restart your time because you completely froze on us.
Okay, is this real quick? And I apologize to everyone about that. If we need to cut wasteful spending, and if we do that, we'll be able to better fund our special education program. We got to cut waste in administration, with 500 car allowances for executives. If we get rid of that, maybe we can get some equity for our special education classrooms and families.
Okay, Antonia.
And just to kind of follow up with the inclusive model, I am a general education teacher. And I think that one of the things that we could also do is better train our general education teachers to work with special education students, since we're always advocating for an inclusive model. The vast majority of time for our students with disabilities, they spend in the general education classroom. So it would be great for general educators to have the training as well as that's how to work with these students. And so I think that's, and also how to work with special education teachers as well. I can speak from my personal experience, there's very little training on how best to work in a co-teaching model.
Okay, excellent. Well, look, we're doing really good on time, so I'm going to sneak in a fifth question just because of how well we're doing on time. Much like I did, apparently with 3 people instead of 4 people, you can get in a lot more in an hour. So here's my final question, and it's about equity in the school system. And James, you touched on this a little bit with our last question. According to the superintendent's State of Howard County Public Schools 2020 presentation, Howard County Public School System students have a graduation rate of 92%. But it's also noted in that presentation that there's a troubling achievement gap still remain for too many student groups lag well behind their peers. And I'm going to do a little show and tell for a second. And this was the slide shared by the superintendent in his 2020 state, which shows graduation rate, as I stated, at 92% for the full system. But we have significantly different graduation rates for some of these other items noted. 89% for Black and African American, 78% for economically disadvantaged, 77% for Hispanic, 67%, James, as you mentioned, for special education, and 43% for English learners. So my question is, what do you think the school system should be doing now to narrow the social and racial opportunity gaps within the school system that exists today? And Larry, you get to go first on this one.
Well, there certainly are opportunity and achievement gaps in our school system and across our county, unfortunately. And I'll answer this with how we could close the achievement gap, because that's been one of my number one priorities that led me to run for the Board of Education in April 2019, long before my opponents probably ever thought about running. But closing the achievement gap and providing a better opportunity or reducing that gap as well requires some creative solutions. And we like increasing tutoring opportunities and after school clubs for music, athletics, and technology, as well as reading specialists. One of the root causes, or one of the root causes for the achievement gap is that minority groups are often discriminated into certain lower level courses. And looking at the chart, even with the graduation rate being what it is for Black or African American students, you also see what it looks like for students who have an economic disadvantage or who are economically disadvantaged. And so, we saw a lot of action from the Board of Education, a lot of bad action that tries to take into account the socioeconomic factors of students and their households. But we have to we have to look at what solutions, what we do for these families, keeping them in their communities, making sure their schools have what it needs to meet their individual needs. Busing these students further increases the opportunity gap and the achievement gap, because now you're putting a strain on mom and dad, and they're not able to stay as well engaged as they may have before.
Okay, Antonia.
Got to unmute myself there. So I think one of the things that when we talk about equity is we need to talk about, you show this graph, right? And it's delineated by specific groups. One of the things it doesn't show is the intersection of these groups. So yes, there are Black students that are graduating at this rate, and on the other side, special education students with disability and special education that have this other achievement. But we need to really start looking at, not in isolation, right? These groups intersect each other. There are Black students that are in special education, right? So like we need to figure out a way to not have these conversations, reframe the conversations that we're having, instead of just talking about just this narrow group, We need to really focus on how we can find solutions that span the broader picture here. And then kind of to speak to, people often talk about the achievement gap. The achievement gap is on the back end. That's the output. That's the data that you're showing us right now. One of the things that I have always said that we need to start focusing on is the opportunity gap. The opportunity gap is on this side. So the opportunity gap is a proactive approach. So we need to make sure that our students have access to the information. They have access to high quality teachers. They have access to internet. They have access to computers. And right now we have this unique opportunity actually to reach out to those students that are in some of these lower achieving groups and provide them with one-on-one services, or provide them with more access to their educators, to their teachers, provide them with more access to programs that they need that we can support them in. So this is, I think, and I think we have an opportunity here to really kind of change the way that we're reaching students. And I love to see, you talked about right now. So right now, I'd love us to start making these changes.
Okay, James.
Sure. So again, equity does cut across a lot of different sections and student groups, and looking at how we start to address that. And Larry talked about redistricting and busing, and part of that, we're seeing right now in terms of getting funding to the schools, funding is a very finite quantity, and looking at resources we have, unfortunately, part of what we have to do in the short term is get students to where the solutions are for them. And so when we talk about addressing issues of equity and opportunity, we need to get them into situations that can prepare them to be more successful. It would be nice to bring the resources to the schools where they are, but we're seeing the feasibility of that, and we can't continue to wait for the perfect solution and funding that may or may not come. We're in a cycle now where we could be years away from ever being to get back to just where we were 12 months ago. And so we need to be creative. We need to be exploring new solutions, delivery models, and taking the opportunity that's here of everything is at play in terms of what solutions are. There is no, going back to normal is not going to be an option for a long time. And it's not even one that I think we should really pursue. I think we need to take the opportunity we have to address it. But we really have to start making movement in terms of, we talk about equity a lot. We need to start acting on equity a lot more. And again, there's the opportunity to start doing that.
All right. Larry, 1 minute follow-up.
Yeah, I think I heard at least one of my opponents say that this distance learning fiasco was working out well. And that's, that's something, when you don't get that right, you're going to see the the achievement gap widen and opportunity gaps widen. But schools often have self-segregated classrooms, no matter what schools anyone attends, because of minority groups being discriminated into certain courses. So this is something we want to talk about, the achievement gap, and we'll talk about what's intersecting and what's not. We have to understand there's data, there's reality, and then there's how data accurately reflects the reality. We need to spend some time in these communities with these families, understanding what the struggles are, what the challenges are. Educators see some of the struggles and challenges in the classroom. Mom and dad sees the other half of it at home. So this is just not about intersecting data. This is also about understanding and knowing the real challenges of real people, real children, and what they're going through and why they may struggle in their education.
Okay, Antonia.
I think I've mostly said everything that I wanted to say, but just kind of to reiterate that that we have an opportunity to really address this problem and explore it in a different light. So I'd love to see us really looking at different solutions. You know, reaching the students that are most vulnerable right now, where they are, because this may continue. We may continue to do this for the next 6 months or a year. Like we just don't know. So I really think that we need to look at what we can do where we are right now.
Okay, James, you get the final word on this one.
Sure. I think we really just have to focus on what actions we're going to take, making sure we've identified a priority, we act towards it, and support those that need it. We have students right now that still can't participate in distance education. They're completely out of the system. We haven't talked very much about students experiencing homelessness and the impact on them as we go right now in terms of their need to be in a school structure as well. And so there's a lot that we could be doing better. We have students that we are underserving, and we need to work tirelessly to get them into the system and get them supports and start meeting them where they're at and getting them where they need to be.
All right, excellent. Well, great, candidates. I appreciate all that. Look, we're going to use the remainder of our time left in this session for the candidates to provide any final comments to those watching online, those that watch later, and to voters in District 2. Keeping with the order, Antonia, you get the first say.
Sorry, I thought you were going back to like James. But so my name is, I'm gonna kind of do it on the reverse and make sure that might be some people's first time watching. So I am Antonia Barkley Watts. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And one of the reasons I'm running is because I'm passionate about education. I am passionate about public education. I believe in public education. I have 2 kids one is a kindergartner and the next is going into the rec program. It was one of the catalysts for me changing my career from engineering to education a decade ago, because I believe in the mission. I understand what's happening at the classroom level. I have actually done some distance learning teaching as well, so I know the challenges that arise there. I have the data experience from engineering. I have the board experience from the Howard County Library System. I sit on their board. And right now I am serving our community. And I think this is one of the things that we want to see in a board member, somebody that is right now committed to public service. So we talked a little about Columbia Community Cares. I'm working with them to serve our community. I am a moderator and presenter on Oakland Mills Online. So check that out. And so I just want to kind of draw in, all of the things that I have done in my past that lead me to this moment. And I think this this is our time. This is our time to really to really impact the course of education, the future of education. And so I'm excited. I'm excited about what we can bring, what I can bring to the school system as far as my background knowledge and my passion for education. And so I hope you guys are looking for your ballot in the mail. I will be the last person on the ballot, very, very last person on both ballots. So just start at the end, and that's where I am.
All right, thank you. James, you're next.
Sure. So thank you again. And, for me, running has shown to be more important now than ever. Looking at, how we're going to continue to respond to this crisis is going to shape our school system and our community for generations to come. The importance on leadership and the leadership experience that I have. I've worked 17 years with college students at the University of Maryland in their personal and professional development. I've been in the classroom at the university level, working on preparing students for their personal success and supporting their personal growth when I work with them. I'm well-versed in the operations of the school system. I'm in the community constantly and working tirelessly to move our community forward. I don't do this for myself. I do this because I believe that we need to help each other as a community, and this is a role that I can play towards that. And so looking at how we're going to build our community through this, we have to build through our students. We have to build a foundation for our community, and preparing our students for their success is how we're going to respond to this crisis. It's also how we're going to be prepared for any future crisis that comes before us. We've seen the disproportionate impact on our most vulnerable communities. We see how greatly the struggle is for those that are in positions that aren't paying them appropriately, aren't preparing them appropriately. The greater we build up our students, the greater we build up our community, and that's something I'm dedicated to.
All right, thank you, James. Larry, you get the final comment today.
Thanks for hosting this event, Scott, and thanks for to the listeners for listening. This is your school system, and your involvement is appreciated. I'm a community advocate and a 3-term Oakland Mills Village Board member running for Board of Education in District 2 to bring my skills of budgeting, procurement, and engaging the community on the Village Board to the Board of Education, where it is sorely needed on aspects such as redistricting and achieving more with our funds. I will bring transparency to the school system by asking the hard questions to make sure our funds achieve more and working to engage the community, including our most vulnerable communities. As a result, this will increase achievement for the students who are currently left behind. The current chair, Mavis Ellis, was an educator, and her tenure has resulted in the achievement gap widening due to money being squandered in central office while programs to address the achievement gap were cut. My opponent has her support and seems to be proud of it, as it is displayed on her social media. We need a community advocate, not an educator, as being an educator alone does not mean they will use or spend the money as wisely. I ask for your support, and I ask for your vote by mail to propel District 2 forward and to put our schools back on top. So vote the second option, Larry Pretlow II, on your ballot for District 2.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank all the candidates for participating in today's session, taking some time out of your early Saturday morning when you could be doing other things, and taking this time to answer some questions and let the community know a little bit about you right before their ballots are going to show up, because they're going to show up any day now. Just a quick announcement for the community. I'm working on some additional candidate sessions in the near future, specifically Judge of the Circuit Court. I'm hoping I can get all 4 candidates to agree to join me in this type of format. I just need everyone to agree on a time, date, and detailed format. I'm working on it. I hope to have some additional information soon about that. But back to the District 2, be sure to go check out all of the candidates' websites, social media channels, and learn as much as you can before you vote. That's all I have today, folks. This is Scott E. signing out.